is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything we know.
I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
To run, climb, kill! We need to help each other. You see someone who's confused, someone who is lost. You keep them moving until we put this place behind us.
What do I sacrifice? Everything!
Out of everything Disney Lucasfilm has done on their streaming platform that may or may not be Bob Iger's way of laundering money out of Disney after his failed political career, but before his retirement, Andor by far is the best of all Star Wars shows in its execution and its consistent quality. Consistency being the one thing that has eluded Disney Lucasfilm since the beginning, to the point that when Andor came out, even the most hardcore Star Wars fans that weren't being incentivized by Disney Lucasfilm with studio events, gift bags, or social media interactions, that is, were unsure if it was worth watching after so much disappointment. 2 of the 3 sequel trilogy movies were divisive at best, and franchise kneecaps at worst, The Force Awakens being the only sequel movie looked back upon with fondness these days, at least by the general audience. As it should be, it's a great movie. Fight me in the comments. The anthology films were put on ice by Disney after Solo, A Star Wars Story, had a box office that looked like a Sony Spider-Man villain spin-off film. Seriously, can you guys just give Andrew Garfield one more film? Everyone with taste wants it. Remember, I said everyone with taste. And the Disney Plus shows were the definition of spectacle over substance. Only instead of jaw-dropping spectacle, it was more so the novelty of seeing things that the Lucasfilm animation department had been doing since 2014 or 2008 brought into live action. I promise this is a positive video about Star Wars, from a certain point of view. So Andor had come and gone with little fanfare or attention from a wider audience, many people, including myself, writing it off and forgetting about it. But eventually, peer pressure got the best of me and I finally watched Andor.
Neither of you could do it on your own, but together.
Krieger's a separatist. Maipe's a neo-republican. The Gorman Front. The Partisan Alliance. Human cultists. Galaxy petitionists. They're lost. All of them. Lost. Lost. What are you, Luther? I've never really known. What are you?
I went into this series thinking I was going to get a generic Star Wars story about that one supporting character from the movie I liked who died in 2016, and then was never mentioned again in live action or animation for years. So imagine my surprise when I was gifted this intimate, grounded, mature Star Wars show that took all the political themes and narratives that were always in Star Wars, but made them the main focus of the story. A series that proved that diversity in media is not a deterrent from quality storytelling if the diverse characters and actors are treated with respect and given quality material instead of just being tokens or human shields to be virtue signaled over by a studio, then left defenseless and tossed into the lion's den if they're not profitable enough. Oh hi, Cass the Acolyte, what are you doing here? Look at the bright side, guys, at least you weren't Thanos snapped like the Willow series, or everything on Max. One of Andor's greatest strengths is its willingness to dive into the moral gray areas of revolution.
Calm. Kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there was no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Luthen's monologue about the personal cost of fighting the Empire is a reflection of the cost of rebellion. Luthen is an empty, morally compromised man who would let good people die, even kill them himself, if it means another victory against the Empire, and the people are free, a galaxy Luthen knows he will never see, nor belong in. We've always had sacrifice in Star Wars, yet rarely if ever has Star Wars ever acknowledged the other side of rebellion, from the ground level. It's why Star Wars Rebels and Rogue One were so popular with Star Wars fans, Rogue One especially, which is considered by many to be the best Disney Star Wars movie. Heroes like Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Han Solo were important for the stories they were in, and the rebellion as a whole. Symbols are integral to the rebellion. Symbols inspire. Symbols give us hope, something to fight for, a way of knowing someone is listening when we have no idea if they are. And even symbols like Luke, Han, and Leia were always willing to die if it meant the rebellion could win and their comrades could fight another day. Yet where the original trilogy focused on the rebellion from the top level, Andor focuses it from the literal bottom, a focus that endears it to many people who are surprised Disney even agreed to make it, given the fact that they are literally the evil empire in the modern day cultural landscape, waging war against art, labor unions, and have an endless series of shady investors. Okay, that's enough truth speaking. I don't want the mouse to copyright the video. Andor also explores how systems of oppression dehumanize not only the oppressed, but also those who enforce and resist such systems. The prison arc also serves as another example of the larger struggle rebellion, highlighting the fact that there will always be more of us, the people, than there is of them, the oppressors, and sadly, no matter how hard we fight, not everyone can make it out alive. The series also makes the Empire a real threat and intimidating again, making it more than just the cartoon evil it usually is portrayed as, but a complex system sustained by bureaucracy, fear, and apathy. By focusing on the inner workings of the Imperial Security Bureau, ISB, and the lives of the ordinary citizens, Andor brings a terrifying realism to Star Wars that hasn't been seen ever in live-action Star Wars, making the Empire's oppression feel all the more intimate and relevant. And again, it's weird because this is Disney. Seriously, Tony Gilroy, how the fuck did you do this? So with all this praise, all these accolades and goodwill, why does it feel like something is missing from Andor? What has always made Star Wars different from other sci-fi stories is that Star Wars has always been science fantasy, along with science fiction. The mythology behind Star Wars, the Force, the dark side, and the light, are what sets Star Wars apart from every other science fiction universe, to a point that none have been able to recapture what George Lucas created nearly half a century ago. It doesn't even matter any comparisons you do between Dune and Star Wars. It is the Star Wars mythology that sets it apart from stories it was inspired by, like Dune. That's not to say that the Star Wars mythology is the difference between a good or a bad project. Most of Disney Star Wars is filled to the brim with key jingling lore that does nothing for the overall quality of their individual stories. Sometimes the lore even brings it down by being vague, poorly executed, or just nonsensical and contradictory. Andor is great for what it is, what story it wants to tell, and there is an endearing quality for a story and its storytelling that focuses on its strengths rather than attempting something it is not good at. With that in mind, there is something to be said about why Andor fails to leave an impression on the general audience or even a wider audience of Star Wars fans. And no, it's not because it's too smart or not flashy enough. As much time as I've spent glazing Andor, it's nothing out of the ordinary when you compare it against other great examples of modern television. Severance, Mr. Robot, Silo, Arcane, more shows than I can even name at the top of my head have taken the sci-fi rebellion genre and made great pieces of art as well. That does not take away from Andor's own flowers, yet it does place it in a position where the flowers exist, not because it is a league above all other shows, but because it is a league above all other Star Wars shows. Andor's strength as a show lies in its comparison to the incompetent IP it belongs to, and as I said, it still deserves all the flowers it gets, and I will always give it to them, but Andor is the answer to people who still want to watch Star Wars above a certain level of quality, but it's not something that restores faith in longtime fans or the general audience that Star Wars can still be good again. There have been shows after Andor that didn't achieve that same level of quality, not the tone, not the story of the characters, but quality that can exist regardless of character, story, or tone. To be brutally honest, while Andor is great in its reflection of one part of Star Wars, it fails fails to capture what Star Wars is completely. Star Wars was more than just a generic sci-fi story of fighting against an evil empire. That story has been told to death in almost every medium for decades, and as good as Andor is, some people want more than the same era that has been oversaturated since Disney bought Star Wars. What many people and the franchise of Star Wars itself needs is a Star Wars project to exist that embraces both political ideology and the fantastical mythology of Star Wars, not one over the other, like every other entry of modern Star Wars has been doing, with varying results of quality and success. This is where Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords, or Cotor 2 as many call it, becomes an interesting comparison to Andor. Cotor 2 is a masterclass in storytelling. It offers a mature and introspective narrative that balances the conflicting political ideologies with philosophical musings on the mythology of Star Wars. Despite the game's protagonist, the Jedi Exile, being a fully customizable character, no matter what path you choose for him or her, light or dark, the Jedi Exile is one of the most fascinating characters in all of Star Wars, as long as you're not reading the Revan novel.
Know your fucking place, trash!
The narrative of Cotor 2 is an incredibly mature story, with themes and questions of free will, responsibility, corruption, sacrifice, trauma, and the cost of war. Cotor 2 and Andor are very much alike. Both are more grounded, mature approaches to Star Wars that seek to further explore and comment on what has always been in the franchise, adding further context and complexity to the original story that spawned them. But whereas Andor focuses only on the various political ideologies that have made the IP what it is, Cotor 2 also focuses on the mythology that makes the franchise as unique as it is, along with its political narrative and themes. Sadly, Cotor 2 is not a story that is easily accessible to modern audiences. Its gameplay and graphics are incredibly dated and buggy, thanks to a rushed development to the point that the vanilla game needs a restoration mod that adds back all the cut content to be a worthwhile story to play, or even the completed story as much as it can be. And while I still love the vanilla game, I myself who play Cotor 2 at least once a year will admit, it is a game not for everyone just because of its rushed development and dated gameplay and graphics. And while the story remains unparalleled across all of Star Wars, 20 years later, Kloei is still remaining one of the greatest creations ever in the entire IP. It exists in a medium that many casual Star Wars fans will never engage with, and even less general audiences will ever even know about. This leaves a glaring vacuum in the franchise, the need for a story that marries Andor's competency of political ideology with Cotor 2's mythological maturity of the Force. Thinking back on why Revenge of the Sith is widely regarded as George Lucas's best film of the prequel trilogy, and for some fans their favorite film in the entire franchise, is that Revenge of the Sith did something that no other Star Wars property has been able to do in a film or show format, not even the original trilogy. It managed to capture the interesting political ideologies of the galaxy, mixed with the mythological uniqueness of Star Wars in a mature and mainstream entertaining way that was also financially successful. Nothing has been able to hold that balance in any recent Star Wars films or shows, or remain competent and above a certain level of quality. It's why many feel Star Wars has not matured. Rather, one part of the franchise languishes in the past, while the other wanders aimlessly, without a place to go or anything to say. Andor is a triumph, a series that proves Star Wars can still tell mature, emotionally resonating stories without relying on nostalgia, spectacle, or incompetent subversion. Yet its success highlights the franchise's ongoing struggle to balance maturity with its fantastical elements. Many incorrectly believe that the only way Star Wars can be mature is to divorce itself from what makes it unique, or that anyone who wants Star Wars to take a page out of Andor's competent display of storytelling just wants everything to be like Andor. But in truth, many people wish Kenobi, Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, the Acolyte, even the Mandalorian were as competently made as Andor, were given the same amount of attention, care, and allowed to be mature stories, regardless of the tone, the characters, or setting it takes place in. There were and are many stories outside of Star Wars that manage to balance emotional complexity and mature themes, while still having levity and joy, while still being for kids even. The saying "it's for kids" doesn't mean bright colors, brain rot, and nonsensical writing that children should be force-fed because they don't deserve quality or can't understand mature stories, despite the clout farming from social media that always pops up saying The Clone Wars, Avatar: The Last Airbender, or whatever whenever Western property wasn't made for kids because it had mature themes or even violence is incorrect. These stories are exactly made for kids, because children are not as stupid or as undeserving of good media as the childish adults online make them out to be. And just for the record, just because something was made for children, 90% of the time at least, doesn't mean it was made by children. These are grown adults getting paid more than the average living person will ever see in their life. They should do a better job. What makes Andor a masterpiece, despite it feeling incomplete to the wider universe and mythology of Star Wars, is its execution, its competency, its commitment to telling a well-told story, and for that it deserves all the praise in the world. And while I will always prefer a Star Wars story that manages to balance competency along with a strong political and mythological story, competency will always be the most important thing in any narrative project, not just in Star Wars, but in storytelling in general, until modern Lucasfilm can deliver a new story that combines the political depth and mythological richness of the Star Wars universe. The IP will remain a franchise, searching for an audience that will continue to shrink as they search elsewhere for stories that better appeal to them. In the meantime, we can celebrate Andor for what it is, a bold, brilliantly executed story. It may not be what Star Wars deserves, but it is what it needs right now.